Oh, divergent paths here, I see. Okay, awesome. Okay, we are live, and this is Ghost to Ghost PM, and I'm your host, Roger Belt. And Michelle, unfortunately, can't be with us tonight. She had a little accident and got hurt. She's okay, but she didn't feel up to doing the show with us, so that's okay. I have Mr. Patrick Burke with me tonight, and this is a very interesting fellow, so you guys be prepared for a good show tonight. Hello, Patrick. Welcome to the show, buddy.
Roger, thank you, buddy. I appreciate it. Looking forward to seeing you.
And I'm going to show everybody, this is what we're talking about. Okay, well, if I got this right.
You're pretty close.
Yeah. Anyway, and this is a really interesting book. And a little bit later on, I'll tell everybody where they can go and find that. But it's called Ghost Soldiers of Gettysburg. And I love Gettysburg. I haven't been there yet, but if I survive long enough, you can bet I'm going to go. That's always been one of my top bucket list places that I wanted to go to. And one of the things, and this is how I'm kind of going to get rolling with this, because I was, and this was, like I said, we were chatting a little bit before the show started, and there's so many things, and how did Willy Wonka put it? Too much time and not enough things, and I'll reverse that. Too many things, not enough time. But I really like one of the things that you said about how you accurately predicting when a paranormal phenomenon may take place, because you're backing up data before, during, and after.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So you kind of can have an idea when something's going to happen or may happen, and you can be ready for it.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly indications when a paranormal event's about to happen. There's always the standard temperature drops, temperature rising, such as the wilderness in Virginia. We were getting high heat spikes. Well, because it was the wilderness. That instance, instead of temperatures dropping, which you would normally expect in a haunting situation, fires were started from the muskets firing, and soldiers that were wounded actually burned to death. In that situation, it was a temperature rise on our gear. But doing this for the last 16 years, and also being a sensitive, about 2001, I decided I'm going to incorporate mediums and sensitives within the team structure. You can only be so scientific on a battlefield. It's not a laboratory. But we wanted to get to the actual story of the ghost soldier, and we wanted to find the hot spots as quickly and efficiently as possible. So I call it the intuitive science method. We brought the sensitive in, and you do your normal sweeps. We set up our cameras to try and triangulate it. We already have the historical research. So sensitives and mediums will come in cold, not knowing any of the information. So we get an audio validation. And if we pick up paranormal activity on video, photography, or audio, then we have the event also collaborated with the voice of the medium talking.
Now, you studied patterns associated with ghostly phenomena, and one can increase their chances of being at the right place at the right time. Also, studying, let me say, I got this now. Studying those you seek to capture by reading their diaries.
Yeah, well, before you walk on a battlefield, I always said this in Battlefield Guide to Ghost Hunting, my first book. You need to do your due diligence. That means reading firsthand accounts, letters of recollection, understanding that it's a battlefield. So take Gettysburg. You cannot possibly investigate the whole battlefield in one night. You can't do it in a year. There's just way too many chances of a traumatic experience happening on the battlefield for a paranormal event to possibly happen. So we broke it down to areas. Let's take something like the Bliss Farm. It was a no man's land. 12th New Jersey, 19th Mississippi, everybody back and forth fighting for that farm. But if you dig down and you know the units, the names of the men that died there, you do your due diligence on the history, you're actually increasing your chance to either trigger the paranormal event or possibly when you walk into that event starting, your questions are already preset. So that's what, that's part of knowing the history of it. It would be no different than if you went into a historical home or Fort Mifflin. You want to know the history of the location. It makes that job to actually participate and accelerate a paranormal event that much easier.
And that's, I think that's really interesting because if you read a soldier's personal diary, not only do you get to, you kind of feel like you know the person.
Absolutely.
And when you're in the particular area where that person fought and died at, knowing that information can be the difference between getting a reaction and not getting a reaction.
Right. And, another part of that too is it's interesting because energy is energy. And we have it all around us. We're energy. When we die, first energy happens, we move on, soul moves on. Same way that we interact, you and I are interacting right now, our auric fields, if we were standing near each other, would be interacting. It's no different than with a ghost soldier or a ghost or a spirit. They'll react to your energy, and it's funny because sometimes I might go ahead and I say, all right, I'm going to do an EVP session, and I'm going to see what we get. I could ask 4 or 5 questions in a minute, 2 minutes, whatever, not getting a response. And I hand it off to somebody else. They could ask the same questions. Bam, they get a response.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that we learned at a fairly early stage of researching and investigating, watching how other teams were doing it and how their evidence came in. Okay, how come this person was getting the response and Roger wasn't? How come Patrick was getting a response but Emily wasn't? And that plays in. So sometimes, even with the double-blind ghost box, we'll switch it up. If Dave Henderson's doing it and he's just not getting a response, 15, 20 minutes into it, we're going to stop. And I'm going to change it up. I'm going to say, hey, Roger, you put the ears on. Let Dave ask questions, and let's see what we get.
And, well, I kind of believe it's the same thing no matter where you're investigating at. If there's actual activity that has been found in this area, that particular spirit may interact with one person there where they won't interact with another. Why do they do that? Good question. Maybe it's kind of like how a dog can sense a good person and a bad person. A dog shackles them back up when they're around somebody they don't like.
Yeah. And the other part could be, Shannon might remind them of a sister or a mother or a wife. Sometimes it's a resemblance to somebody they knew while they were alive. That is the interaction.
Well, also it's like if you have a child spirit involved, they'll interact with a female because of that motherly instinct.
Right. And
where they may not,
Right. And my co-author in the book, Jack Roth, he has an affiliation with kids. I mean, kids' energy is just like swarm to him. So some people are like that. I mean, again, whether it was a child or adult or older person, whatever, they were alive at one point. They're still alive. They're just walking in a different light. That's what my brother John used to say. They just walking in a different light. So as soon as we start interacting in that energy structure, they read you. They'll know you're a good person. You like kids. You don't like kids. They get it. And those kids will automatically be drawn to somebody that, oh man, they like kids. I'm gonna go play on him and yank his sleeve or pull his pants leg and let him know I'm here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Um, and of course, as we know, Civil War battles are prime places for history to repeat itself. As in, you're going to have, uh, no matter what battlefield you go to, there's going to be some residual.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
really not much of a way around that. Too much traumatic stuff goes on. And I kind of wonder about, you know, you could probably go to Gettysburg and get activity any day of the year. But if you went on the day that the battle started, would you get more activity on that day because that was the actual date or day? And so they basically, might be like refighting the battle all over again.
Yeah, on a residual level, which is probably 95%, 95% of your interaction on a battlefield is probably going to be at a residual level. Our energy will trigger a residual event. Does it happen more often on the date? Well, I've been there on July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, and one visit didn't get so much. Another visit got a lot of stuff. So I think it actually is just a little bit of being at the right place at the right time.
Right.
That always figures in, but also being prepared. So if you know that Sergeant Moss, 19th Mississippi, died at Bliss Farm, and you're there, you can feel the activity, especially if you got a sensitive in the group. And just so your audience knows, Roger, sensitive for me means medium, empath, somebody who can hear or see or even communicate. I use that term encompassing everything. So I don't, associate it solely just to a person who sometimes feels stuff. So to me, a sensitive is, an all-encompassing term. But what we found in all of our investigations, not just battlefields, is that having sensitives involved in that team structure, it's critical. It really helps draw in the energies. They know that there's somebody there they can speak with. If I can't hear anything but Roger is able to talk to somebody, and the guy's over on my door knocking, I don't hear it, they can realize Roger can hear that knocking. I'm going to go over and I'm going to talk to Roger.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I put a lot of weight on the date of the activity, because I've been there when different battlefields and different historical places when something historical had happened. I didn't get anything.
Yeah, I was just curious. Would it make a difference? But.
Yeah, the first time it happened at Gettysburg, I was actually shocked. I was like, I'm here first, second, and third, and I've got, a small percentage of interaction. The next time I went on those dates, there was a much larger sampling of interaction with them.
If you and this is kind of like, I guess, sort of like having a trigger object, but with you personally being the trigger object, okay? If you don the Confederate uniform and you place yourself like where they would have come out and started the battle, right, to where they collide, so to speak. Okay, you got the uniform on. You read the diaries of certain soldiers that fought in that unit where you're at, and you take off out there. Let's go get them, boys.
Right.
Do you think that would stir up something? Or
without a doubt, reenactors increase your chance of capturing a paranormal event. It depends on what you're doing. We're talking battlefields here, so obviously doesn't matter if it's a Revolutionary War, Civil War, World War I, World War II, Vietnam, etc. Those soldiers that are still lost on the battlefield, and when I say that, I'm talking about live interactive hauntings that isn't residual, haven't crossed over. They'll react to something familiar. Campsite, soldiers around the campsite. I always say in my lectures, I say, I was in the military. That's part of why I want to, try and get the story of those people that gave the last full measure. But it doesn't matter if I'm sitting at a campfire and I got somebody from the French Indian Wars, the American Revolution, World War I, World War II, even a different language. Soldiers have a language, and they're going to communicate. So if you have reenactors, and I've done this for a couple of pilot TV shows called Ghost Soldiers, actually. I brought in reenactors, North and South, Gettysburg, Antietam, Shiloh, Captain Miller's group over at Shiloh. We walked around with them when we were over there for a week on that battlefield. So definitely, without a doubt, reenactors increase your percentage of capturing that moment dramatically.
I always want to go to Antietam too. That's another place on my list.
Yeah, Antietam is probably one of the most pristine battlefields around. I mean, I know they're doing the work at Gettysburg and they're trying to get it back to what it looked like at the point of the battle. But Antietam is, I've been there just as many times as Gettysburg, and it's a special place in my heart. That's one of the next books I'm working on is Ghost Soldiers of Antietam. So I've just had incredible experiences there.
Awesome. Now the double blind ghost box, you guys did that. Of course, like I said, I did a show with Sean and Dan, and we talked about those experiments, which I think is really cool. We're definitely going to try some of that stuff ourselves. And you said using mediums to find locations of activity. How accurate have you found that to be? Is it like 95% or lower or higher?
I tell you, at this point in my career in the study, research, and investigations, we're probably capturing evidence 90% of the time, if not 95% of the time. I find that the sensitive, medium, whatever your audience wants to call them, is invaluable. I prefer that they come in cold to the spot so that the information they're getting, majority of the time, as a sensitive myself, I'm getting it too. I don't share it with them because at that point, if I'm the lead investigator, I simply want to validate what they're getting from what I know of the history. So I only share if it progresses the investigation and the needs of the lost soul, the soldier. If it progresses it further, then I'll pitch in. But mostly, I'm using that sensitive, medium empath to find those hot spots, and that's just a matter of Antietam, Dunkard Church, Miller's Cornfield, West Woods. You have to go to the locations, and you're pinpointing the hot spots. And you got the rest of the team there. So, I might say Mike Hartness, who's one of my best buddies from the Wolfpack, I might say, look, we're going to have to set a camera here to the left, triangulate over to the right. And we're going to make sure we do a double blind ghost box session here because this is a hot spot. So having the medium or sensitive, Andy, it helps. It definitely, you're not wandering around just walking on the battlefield hoping the event happens. You're kind of tracking it down, and then you're picking your 3 or 4 hottest spots to hit it.
Now, what did you mean when you used the term shadow walkers?
Well, a lot of people use terminology for seeing shadows that look human form. Some people will call them shadow people.
Okay.
Some people refer to them as aliens. When I call them shadow walkers, the outline is distinctly soldiers. So I'll give you, for instance, one of the first videos I shot captured 4 apparitions that night.
Wow.
One was a shadow walker in the wheat field, and you could see the soldier. You could actually see the musket rifle on the shoulder. You can see the knapsack on the back as it goes by. It's a brief, 1.5 second hit. You can see it go through. I refer to that specifically as a shadow walker. So I'm trying to delineate from going to like one of the insane asylums where they see all these shadows creeping up the hallway and shadow people or lost souls, as I like to refer to them. The shadow walker for me is a residual of a soldier on a battlefield. That's just the outline of the soldier. That's what that means. Okay.
Good. I was kind of wondering, if you were referring.
Yeah, because there's a lot of different definitions that people use different terms.
Yeah. couple of things I'd like to elaborate on for those that may not understand. If if you're like when you go to a site, what is the best way to find where the activity is? And you brought up using a psychic or medium or sensitive or whatever. Is there any other ways that you could think of that?
Yeah. I mean, certainly, since we're right now we're talking battlefields. So, what you want to do is you want to do your initial research on the battlefield. So Gettysburg, I broke it down into phases, and then I had to decide which phase was most likely to get me a paranormal event. So some of the worst fighting was in the triangular field. So I chose specifically triangular field. Then I had to choose the units that were there. 125th New York Orange Blossom, 1st Arkansas, 4th Texas, 5th Texas, 35th Georgia, and Henning's Georgia Brigade. So then I had to dig in. Okay, who lost their life there? What happened there? Okay, and then I had to pick the spots where everybody does it a little bit differently. What I normally do is I go all the way down to what I call the grunt, and I go into the company history, find out were there any brothers. Now, with 34th Georgia, I had 2 brothers. One died at Triangular Field. So now I got those to focus on. Can I get the one brother that survived the battle and find out if the other brother was there or had crossed over? Can I get him to come back? So normally what I'll do is I'll look at the conflict. Take Shiloh, Bloody Pond. I mean, all the wounded people were there trying to get just a little bit of water in them. That's a high traumatic stress area because not only were they wounded, the water itself was now tainted because of the amount of blood in it and people dying in it. So getting the drink of water was a big issue. Or the hornet's nest. The Union officer there, I can't recall his name, but holding on for 4 hours, surrounded with cannons, dude. That's one of those instances where you're thinking, really, you guys are it was hell's bells for them. And it actually saved Grant's butt. So that's what I'll do. I would take the most traumatic areas I can find, and I'll turn around and I'll say, okay, let me break it down to the company level. Did any officers die there? Were the officers loved? For instance, we did an EVP session over at the cavalry field on day 3 at Gettysburg, and we went to the Michigan Monument and we asked, "Did you guys love Custard?" And the answer we got back was, "Hell no." Right? Hell no. Historically, they hated his guts, but he was a winner, so they didn't care. Yeah, he might treat us like crap, but we're going to stick with him because we don't lose. So you have to do that again. I call it due diligence. You have to do that research to give yourself the best shot. Now, once you do that research, you can direct the sensitive or medium. You can say, okay, well, look, Emily, we're going to go over here to the West Woods, all right? Because this is where John Bell Hood, Confederate general that drove the 12th Corps, the Mansfield's Corps, the Union Corps, out of the cornfield at Antietam. And he went in with 5,000 men, came back with 2,200, right? Reformed in the West Woods, and he took all the stragglers until he had about a 4,500-man force reformed over there. So I would say, here's a traumatic area. Here's, where spirits might be down. Now I'm going to take the sensitive to that area, the medium. I'm going to say, okay, how about you test this area? What does it feel like? Do you think it's a hot spot? So you did your historical research, which gives you an edge. Now you know where to take your mediums or your sensitives to try and test that area and find out if it's hot.
That's an interesting way to go about that, actually.
Works well for us. Like I say, about 95% of the time, we always get something. And every time I'm with Sean and Dan, we always get something. It's like 100% with those guys.
But, and that would be the first thing that I would consider if I wanted to find where to get activity at, is I would want to know, number one, where is the worst, what's the word I'm looking for here?
The most traumatic conflict on the battlefield?
Yes, the most dramatic battle. Where did that take place? What area? What spot? then I'm going to want to know, who was fighting
Sure.
so that I can use specific names.
Yep.
And I mean, I'm probably not the sharpest tool in the shed when it comes to all this, but I have a logical way of looking at things.
Yeah, and you know what? You're a lot sharper than you're giving yourself credit for. But the reality is, it's common sense. By doing a methodical research and making sure you have all the information, that dictates that I'm going to further, if nothing else, my knowledge of the
Exactly.
battle, which is just as rewarding. But if you're really trying to capture that paranormal moment, having that information, it's a logical step. I have this information. I know that I have an idea at Gettysburg where Brown's battery was assaulted, and I want to know how come. I'll give you a perfect instance. In writing the book, Ghost Soldiers of Gettysburg, I decided with Jack, we went and we did our own investigation after I do my research at the National Archives and Library of Congress. And I went there and found the map, I just drew a blank. Elliot's map. And that map, the first time I saw that was way before I started thinking about writing the book. Elliot was hired by the U.S. Congress in '64 to map the battlefield of Gettysburg. The primary objective was they wanted to know where the troops started, both sides, where they ended up, so they could figure out, okay, what we do right, what we do wrong, how did this battle flow, right? But when he went there, all the graves, mass graves and individual graves, were still there on the field. All the lunettes, those earthworks where the cannons go in, were there. Bones on the field of horses, and even armament was still on the field. So he not only did what the Congress required, but he also marked down all of the graves, those that died after the battle from hospital burials, and he used Taneytown. The Taneytown Road was a marker. So Taneytown Road is on the backside of Cemetery Ridge. And his map states anything on the right side of Taneytown Road is hospital dead. That's pretty darn clear. Okay, hospital dead. On the left, battlefield dead. And as I was looking at the map, I noticed history says that Armistead crossed over with about, some people say 200, other people will say about 100 rebel soldiers, Confederate soldiers, crossed the wall, Bloody Angle, made it to the Copsa Tree, and then they were wiped out, right? Okay. In fact, he made it to Ricketts Battery, got mortally wounded. But on the map, it shows a total of, I want to say about 39 individual Confederate graves, all the way 200 yards past Cemetery Ridge. And that's what got me thinking, okay, what's going on here? I'm looking at the history, and that history is telling me that something happened over here that wasn't hospital dead, that was battlefield dead. So I had to do years of research to figure out what happened there, and got a hold of, I don't know if you had a chance to read chapter, I think it's chapter 11, A Study in Paranormal Archaeology, Wright's Brigade. I don't know if you got to that chapter yet, Roger.
No, I didn't get that far yet.
You're going to love that because what that chapter does, it rewrites history. Everybody tells you the high water mark is where Armistead died at Ricketts Battery. Okay. The reality is Wright's Brigade, his OR, the official report states that on the second day of the battle, he not only advanced to the Copsa Trees, he went beyond it to the Sherfy house. Miss Sherfy had two different houses. One was Meade's headquarters. The other one was a couple hundred yards down to the right. Anyways, he advanced and took the guns on the hill, on the heights, and held it for about 45 minutes. He got no support, had to fall back. Now, the Union side will say that's crap. That's BS. It never happened until you really do your history. And that's what you have to do. You have to dig it down. So historically, I was able to prove that not only was Wright's report correct, but the Chief of Artillery, Hunt, his tent was pitched exactly where he would see Wright's brigade pierce the Union defense, and he wrote about it in his letters of recollection in Century Magazine. And he talks about it in the second letter. He says, on day 2, Wilcox attacked and got to a certain point. He was talking about everybody, and then there's just one little sentence, and he says, oh yeah, and by the way, the only person to take our lines and take the guns was Wright. So the high watermark Confederacy should actually be moved from where Armistead fell to day 2 action on top of Cemetery Ridge.
Wow.
Okay. So historically, I was able to find that. Paranormally, I've had experiences there. I've talked to Michael Medved. I don't know if you heard his name. He's a West Coast talk show host. And I did in the Washington Post did a big thing on me and my team and wrote about it and went AP and all, you know how it is sometimes. And he called me up and said, I want you on my show. I was like, he's a political commentator. I was like, well, dude, I'm not doing politics. I do ghost hunting on battlefields. I mean, that's what I do. I'm a researcher, investigator. He said, no, I had an experience there when I was 17. Oh, so I went on a show, and this is what got me thinking and got me into the Elliott map. He said that he was hitchhiking back in the late 70s, early 70s, late 60s, and they made it to Gettysburg. He said back in those days, it was like one ranger for the whole battlefield, right? So they camped out right at the copse of trees, just opened up their sleeping bags because he was hitchhiking cross country. And he and his friend were sleeping at about 2 o'clock in the morning. He felt chilled. He didn't hear the sounds of nature anymore. And he sat up and he saw about 8 or 9 people running at him with guns in their hands. And they were running from the copse of trees towards Ziegler Field, right? So he said when he saw that, he was hitting his buddy. He said, oh my God, trying to wake him up. His buddy had his sleeping bag over his head. He's like, I want no part of this. And he realized they were glowing. They were dressed butternut gray, and they had the weapons leveled, but they weren't looking at him. They were looking at another point.
Right.
Now that's in the area, historically, you read that should, there's no account of a Confederates in the area he was at from the copse of tree to Ziegler, because he's on the backside of Cemetery Ridge, not on the top, not on the front towards the wall. He's on the backside. There's no account of Confederates en masse coming through there. Now, I know 8 doesn't sound like en masse. It was 8 or 12. But and with paranormal events, you don't always see hundreds, right?
Yeah.
So that got me thinking, why were they there? If they were prisoners, they wouldn't have been armed, right?
Right.
So why were they there armed? What caused that? And he said distinctly, he remembered the one thing, there was just no sound. He couldn't hear anything. And then they just disappeared, just vanished for him. So that got me thinking, how can I verify Wright's activity from the eyes of the participants? You know what I mean? Sometimes right. I think of myself as a historical reporter. I want to know from General Wright a number of things. I can't know that necessarily through history unless he wrote about it, but I want to know at the time, at the action, what his thoughts were, what happened here. And the only way to do that is paranormal investigation. You have to go out and you have to work until you can get the evidence. And that's what we did. I took 3 teams of double-blind ghost box, and I found out a couple of things. One of the questions I had, and maybe some of your viewers have been to Gettysburg, but you have the Kadoorie House, okay? And then and Brown had 2 guns up there, and he had another 4 guns on what is called Brown's Knoll, which is in front of the wall, where the 15th Mass and the 82nd New York were hunkered down. They were at Kadoorie, fell back to the wall. But I always wondered if Wright's brigade comes through the Kadoorie House, and I've got 4 cannon, and I'm loaded for shrapnel, and basically I've got canister, and I'm trying to just, hit him hard. How come he didn't have more of an effect on his forces coming forward? And I was doing some research, and I found a video of one of the guides, and he was talking on Brown's Knoll, and he said, when Brown set up his cannons, he set it up west. Okay, that means that he was looking towards the town because he thought the Confederates would be coming from there. When Wright broke the lines at Kadoorie House, he realized his mistake, and they had to try and turn the guns, and he can only turn two. And by the time he turned two, Wright smacked him. He didn't have enough time to turn his guns. I asked questions about that, and the double-blind ghost box actually gave me answers exactly to that historical moment. So, anyways, what the double-blind ghost box actually did for me in the book, it validated what I, as a sensitive, was getting, other evidence that I've gotten in the past, but it also let me pinpoint where the break in the line was between the 15th Massachusetts and the 82nd New York, because that wall was broken, and then Wright took the heights and took the guns. And the backfield area, as they were regrouping, Webb's reinforcements came in and blasted them, and everybody fell back. That was a long story, I know, but I wanted to make sure that the audience understands that there's a way to validate your own personal experiences. Historically, certainly, but that's not always what you want, because sometimes your personal experiences just that personal experience. Other times, you really want to capture some form of the paranormal experience so you can share it with others, because, it's a life that was lost there, and they have a right for that story to be shared.
Yeah. Well, one of the things about, you were mentioning that there wasn't nothing said about these guys being in that particular area.
Yeah.
And this is the case in a lot of battles like this. You will have areas where there were actually people there, but it wasn't recorded. So you're missing out on a lot of stuff because there's no record of it. Is if you just happen to run into it and you have activity take place, and then you can dig and dig, and you may find a little something, and you may not. Box may give you a little bit of the answer to that also, because these guys that he was talking about, was running with the weapons and everything. There's no record of them being in that area. So,
no.
How do you? How many other areas was there actually stuff going on that wasn't recorded?
Sure, and how many battlefields are there that can happen?
Yeah. I mean,
I was at over there's like 4 or 5 battlefields right around Fredericksburg, Virginia. One of them is Salem Church, and on the backside of Salem Church is what they call the Mule Shoal, another part of the battlefield. One part of it's called East Bloody Angle. And at that location, I was taking out, I take sensitives and mediums out to see how well and accurate they can be, and work with them within our style to try and train them up to our level of expertise. And I had this one young lady out there. She was talking about unknown soldiers at this witness. It was a witness tree. It was a huge tree left in front of the East Bloody Angle. And she said, I'm pretty sure it's Confederate, but there's also Union here. Well, at this one spot, I'm standing there and I turn and I look right. And I know accurately she's communicating because I feel the energies. I even though I don't necessarily was talking to them at that time, I can feel their presence. So there's definitely good soldiers there. There was activity there. But I look to the right, and about 150 yards away are the Confederate trenches. And I know the history, and I'm thinking to myself, man, there is no history that says, that I can recall, that said the Confederates advanced 150, 200 yards past their trenches to push the Union soldiers back or try and collapse their line, right? So we got video activity of it. We got paranormal mist rolling, got the sound of a soldier giving us his name that died there. Got all that stuff on video and audio. Great evidence, okay? Later on, I was doing the research trying to figure out the name, because I heard Keith Tucker, but other people were hearing some other names. So we started doing some analytical on the voice. It's actually 4 or 5 voices mixed into the one voice, right? So, and that happens sometimes. But what was interesting is I was doing the research. I found out that on the specific day of that fighting, it was a downpour. It was just bloody hell. And one of the things I was thinking, what you were saying, Well, the South had to withdraw from there, so the Union basically won that confrontation. But they always take care of their dead. The Union soldiers are always cared for first, and then the Confederate soldiers are in turn later. So I couldn't understand. I was thinking she said Confederate and Union unknown. Well, they wouldn't just leave their dead there. They would have buried them. They wouldn't have been unknown, or they've been unknown in the sense that this is a mass grave of soldiers. Later, I was at a conference there, and Jack and I and a good friend of mine who's a 0 Point medium, also like my daughter, Melody Bussey, they were there, and Jack's recording is nothing but rainfall. We're at the witness tree, and Melody's touching the tree, and she said, "It's horrific here. They ran over their wounded, and they suffocated in the mud." Oh. So I did a little bit more research, found out, sure enough, not only did the Confederates jump out past their trenches, they had a conflict, and they had to run back to their trenches, so the Confederates did advance, which means some of the Confederates, unknown soldiers, are buried there. And the Union soldiers that were unknown, it was so wet and it was such a downpour for 3 or 4 days that as they advanced, the wounded were shoved down literally a foot into the mud.
Wow.
So, So, horrific. It's a horrific story telling it. It's even more so when you realize that not only were you there and were you getting it, but now, you get to share the story that there were some people here that no one even knew passed away.
Now, this is an interesting thing I wanted to bring up. You was talking about where someone has died tragically or traumatically. At the moment of death, the separation between the physical body and the personality or soul is hampered by a condition of emotional shock that prevents normal transition to the spirit world. So basically, that's saying this is why we have ghosts on the battlefield.
Yeah. The human condition, it's a shock when you die, even if you're prepared for it. And these soldiers certainly were prepared for it. They knew going in, their chances of walking out were minimal.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that your human condition and your what you would call your essence, your soul, necessarily is ready to give up.
Exactly.
So you can have the point where, I've had different instances where I was actually at Antietam. I was with a good friend of mine, Morgan Eaglebear. He's a Native American healer, and he's also a medium. And we were sitting at a near Lee's headquarters in a house, and we were just chatting, and no windows open, no fans blowing, and I look out the corner of my eye and I see a movement. I follow it, and then the curtains on the kitchen door flap like someone walked through them. And it happened about 10 minutes later. It happened again. And he saw me look, and he said, "You saw that?" I said, "Yeah, what's going on there?" Because I know feels like a soldier to me. He goes, "It's a soldier that doesn't realize he's dead, and he's just doing his routine. The last moment of his life, he's just going through, rotating just like a computer program." It wasn't residual. It wasn't interactive, though, because there was no communication on his part to us. He was just following the same path he had before he died.
Right.
So the spirit sometimes doesn't want to give it up. What we do now, especially with Sean and Dan and our teams combined into Supernatural Media, we try and not only understand why the haunting's happening, but what we call the lost souls. We take that next step and we try and cross them over to God's grace. We want them to go ahead and move on with their life, not to be stuck in that endless battle.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to ask you a crazy question, okay?
Nothing's crazy. This is paranormal.
Right, exactly. But now, I've wondered about this a lot of times where you're in a situation like in a traumatic battle situation. Could possibly, like say, you have a Confederate soldier, he's charging, and all of a sudden he gets shot and he gets hit in a place to where it's like instant death. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, at that point, it's so fast and it's so traumatic, and he doesn't realize that he's dead. Okay, so does he continue to charge on with his weapon drawn, going towards him like he's still fighting the battle at that time?
Yeah, you know, that's a great question. No one ever asked me that.
Well, I mean, it just dawned on me.
Honestly, at that point, I would think anything is a possibility because it's a headshot, instant death. You're down. Your soul, your essence leaves the body, and you're still forward momentum. Certainly, it's a possibility. That could be part of the residual. Could be part of the residual haunting effect where you see soldiers charging out of the woods, like we did at the. There were shadow walkers, but I had 2 Union reenactors, and again, Melody Bussey, the 0 Point Field medium, buddy of mine, she's a descendant of John Bell Hood, Confederate general. So we're in Miller's cornfield, right? I got the camera crews on her, and I have my own cameras running, and I had another medium with me, Terry Templowski, excellent investigating medium, and I had the guys running towards her, and as they move, as they get ready to move, I told this one guy, Kurt, I said, I want you to say charge really loud. He says charge, and Terry and I happened to be looking down East Woods, and we jumped because the whole line of woods erupted with men, shadow walkers, just exploding out of the woods. And I'm going to say a word that I'm not going to say the word that I said at the time because, you know, it was like, holy shit, except it was a little bit more vociferous, you know what I mean? And she jumped, and she's from New Jersey, so you can imagine what she said because she's a Jersey girl. But it's one of those things that was just incredible because sometimes you catch it. We didn't catch it with any cameras because I didn't have them set up there. But what we did catch is as the 2 Union reenactors started coming up to Melody, another shadow walker appeared off the left Union soldier, did a little dance around him, moved past Melody, and veered right towards the West Woods. So one area the cameras picked it up in the most dramatic area, which was the explosion out of the woods. Sometimes that's just a personal experience. It's a gift, but, you know, and that was certainly residual in that respect. And that goes back to the reenactors, you know, those ghost soldiers, those energies definitely react to the reenactors. But to the question of once they fell, do they keep going on in the spirit of the fight? Yeah, I don't know because I never, I honestly never asked that question. I mean, that would have to be a question that I would have to ask a direct interaction with a live, you know, not a residual energy, but a live interaction energy, spirit.
Yeah.
It's there. And I would have to say, listen, I know it might be painful, but when you died, can you tell me what that process was? I never did that. My focus has always been to get them cross over into God's grace and peace. That's, you know, but now that you ask that, I think I'm going to have to at least ask that question.
Well, it's just, you know, could it be like, you know, like I'm saying, you know, if they got hit and they died instantly, could their soul be jerked out so quick that they just continued on and they're still charging in their I don't know what kind of afterlife consciousness they would have, but I'm just saying in their afterlife consciousness, they're still fighting because it happened so quick they don't know that they died yet. So they're still fighting the battle.
Right. Well, you know, their conscious is still part of their energy, their soul. I mean, you know, you don't lose that. If you believe in reincarnation, that life experience still moves off with you until your next life experience. If you don't believe in reincarnation, that conscious, once you died, doesn't just go away, right? It's still with the soul. It's still with you. It's part of you. So is that a possibility? Absolutely. You know, I had never thought about asking that question. So that's a question that, you know,
just, you know, all of a sudden like, well, hell, if they, you know, if it happened that quick, you know, the body may drop, but the essence is still charging.
Sure.
You know?
And you would have to think there would be a point where if that's the case and that essence, the soul's still going forward, the spirit runs through the union line and nobody drops. At that point, you have to say, okay, that deceased soldier has to know something happened.
Yeah.
Logically, you would think, but it's an interesting question. It's an interesting hypothesis. It's a possibility. I'm not going to say it's not.
Well, I mean, that's something I'd be curious to know. I'd love to be able to find out. So if you ever get a confirmation on that, be
I'll
sure.
definitely let you know, buddy. Or if any of your listeners take that theory and try and play it out and get it, they should definitely let you know so you can share.
Yeah, definitely. The best locations to collect evidence of ghost activity, of course, are those where extreme violence and suffering has occurred. And of course, and that kind of leads into what we were just saying, they may not even know, they may still fight because they don't know that they've gone yet. So that's interesting. If you're interested in ghosts and plan to visit a battlefield someday, and this, I like the way some of this stuff is wrote out, because I would definitely be interested.
Thank you.
But then again, that's me. What to look for before you can understand the nature of an experience? You must first ask an essential question: what exactly is a ghost?
Yep.
What exactly is a ghost? I mean, does anybody really know?
We all have a definition of what exactly a ghost is, and some is very generic, right? And I'm sure your audience that's interested in your show knows all the basic forms. From my perspective, a ghost is just the soul, either earthbound, hasn't crossed over, or it has crossed over and it's coming back to visit. Interact.
Now, why would, I have to ask this, okay? Why would, if, and it depends on what's over there, because we won't really know that until we get there. I mean, you can ask that question and a spirit can tell you something, but then again, can a spirit lie? Yes, they can. You really don't know what to expect when you get to the other side. And I lost my train of thought there. There was something in mind that goes with this. Why would you, if it's
why would you stay
right over there? Why would you want to
stay
back over here?
Let me use the battlefield as example. The majority, if not all, of the soldiers that followed that were self-proclaimed Christians. Okay, so they believed that literally, if you killed somebody, you were going to be judged for that killing.
Right.
Now, the Bible, speaks differently in various verses. You have to obey your officials, the president, whatever. If you're ordered to do something, there's God's laws and there's the human laws. Right. So, a perfect example. In front of the first Minnesota at Gettysburg, we ran into a Confederate soldier, and we had a natural tri-field meter, EMF detectors, a few other pieces of equipment, digital thermometer that does a reading three readings every second. It's a power wand, and we were getting these energy readings, and we were trying to talk to this soldier because it was not residual, it was live interaction, it was interacting. And I had to be careful. I'm going to say it this way. Sometimes you're right, they don't know they're dead. And they're just still going through the process of living their life as they last lived it, not realizing they're dead. So, you have to be careful in evaluating and interacting with the spirit, especially sensitive, because you don't want to shock the soul either. Oh, by the way, do you know how long you've been dead? What? I'm dead, right? You don't want to shock it.
Right.
Okay. So we had to work gently into it to make him realize that he was dead. And then he literally was fearful. He said, I cannot cross over. I will be judged. Okay. Now, wait a second. You were following orders. And I understand you might have killed half a dozen men, but that was following your orders. And at that point, I realized the majority of those soldiers that are left on battlefields, and I'm only speaking to the American Civil War at this point, that are live and interactive, that haven't crossed over, stayed earthbound, it's because of that judgment. They're fearful, and the majority of them are fearful of what will happen. Some of them, not all soldiers were good people, are very negative energy, and they survive off those lost souls. And I've dealt with those before. I've had to clear out the bad energy to get the other energies, the other souls to cross over. So to answer your question, on the battlefield, American Civil War, the majority of those guys are fearful of judgment. They don't want to go to hell. So you have to convince them, look, you're not going to go to hell. And for that one gentleman, we actually had to bring his mother and his sister in to help cross him over.
Now, this is going to deviate from our battlefield subject here for just a second.
That's okay. But a side road is okay.
As we were talking about this, it dawned on me all of a sudden, because you brought up that a lot of them were Christian and they felt like they were going to be judged.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, Christians fought wars, but yet they were not supposed to kill. So why would God say it's okay to kill these people but not those people?
Yeah. That's a question that I couldn't possibly answer unless I go ahead and I ask God, what's the deal there, right? For me personally, I view my religious beliefs are very much into Christ-driven, okay? But I'm also trained in shamanics, and I found the Native Americans deal the best with the supernatural. So I use, I'm Catholic, so I bring in my Catholic and the Native American, I bring it together to help facilitate those souls. I don't question the Bible on the or any religious text. My interactions directly with the soul and with God. I know what you're asking me is, why would God contradict himself? And
well,
the only thing I was going to say, the only thing I could say there is, translation is a funny thing. You're going from,
in the Bible, you had your Christians who were fighting against the Palestinians, or what have you, and they were going forward and killing the Palestinians with the Ark of the Covenant with them, because God was with them in the Ark of the Covenant so that they would win the war. But yet, you can't go kill these people over here because, I say they're...
Right. Well, again, the translation is funny too, because the commandment is thou shalt not kill, but that's not the translation. The actual translation is thou shalt not commit murder. Now, is war a form of murder? Because the Hebrew Old Testament Torah talks about obeying your king. Okay, so there's contradictions in any religious writings. I get it.
Is it still not murder? If
you'd have to say, what's the definition of murder, right? Well,
even if you're fighting a war, you killed another human being. Is that not still murder?
Right. And from our perspective, it very well could be. It's really the perspective of the society at the time. Are you killing somebody because they're invading you and trying to harm you and your family? Is that murder if you kill them because they're trying to harm you? I
understand what you're saying. I'm just saying, though, in the whole big logic of the whole thing,
mm-hmm.
if one human being kills another human being, it's still murder, is it not?
Well, again, it's societal definition. Like, again, you understand what I'm saying? I know what you're asking me, but is it taking of another human life considered murder? I guess in a form you could say yes, but at the same time, do I let someone kill me because they're attacking me and I don't defend myself?
Exactly. That's what makes it confusing when you think about all that, sure. Right? Because you're defending yourself, but yet at the same time, you are taking another human life.
You are. There's no doubt.
I don't know. It's all confusing anyway. Let's get back on track here before we wind up in Neverland. But I had to ask that about
It's cool. It's cool. Again,
they fought wars and they were, but God said it's okay to kill them.
Well, it also, back in those days, the patriarchy was, the final word. king might say we're going to go to war, but the religious leaders had to condone it.
Anyway, one of the things here, and we're getting into the book now because I've went through everything that I wrote down, but I had stuff here that I outlined. And where I started here, someone who has died tragically or traumatically, we talked about this, at the moment of death, they don't really know, I guess, that they're gone. As a result, the condition of death isn't recorded in the conscious mind of the one who has died. Life as it was continues on to exist in the mind of the deceased. And that's why I asked you if the guy got shot and he's charged, would he continue to charge?
Yeah, well, again, that's a possibility. The other possibility is you shot, your fall, or whatever the death is, and you're looking at your body and you're sitting there going, what the hell? What's going on here?
There's
definitely a delay. There's no doubt
that one or two things is going to happen. One, you're going to keep charging and fighting because you don't realize yet that you're gone. Or two, you're going to you're going to see your body going down. You're going to stand there like, what the hell?
Right. Right. It's going to be one or the other probably.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. That is.
Location represents a major factor in determining who the intelligent entities might be. In these cases, it has been theorized that spirits are connected to places through strong emotional bonds, which as a battlefield would be such a place.
Sure would.
Why would they remain there? Because it could be different reasons, I think, why they would remain there. But, if it was a traumatic experience, do they just stay there because, they don't realize they can go anywhere else?
Well, I think it's, there's a number of reasons why they might stay there. One is they don't realize they're dead. So they're still doing their duty. So they're going through those final moments of their life. They might even be setting up a camp before they have to go into action, anything that is associated with the last day of their life. The other is they're afraid of judgment. They realize they're dead, but I'm going to stay. I'm not going to go to judgment.
Right.
Another scenario is take Ambrose Wright of Wright's Brigade. Double blind ghost box. I gave the questioner the select questions to ask at certain places. One was on top of Cemetery Ridge looking down at Sherfy House. And she asked General Wright, "Are you here?" And the response was yes. And then Amy asked, I can't remember the colonel's name. There was a colonel there that died. And the response was, no, he's in heaven. Right? So did Colonel Wright not cross over? That's not the impression I ever got when I was there. I never felt his energy there on the battlefield as a slow energy. But sometimes when you're talking, and I'll give you another example, you're talking about a specific location, you're there, you're talking about an energy. Dr. Mudd's house, John Wilkes Booth, Ed Spangler, okay? We could be talking about them. They could have already they might not be earthbound. They might have crossed over, but you're talking about them specifically about something that happened there. That can bring the energy back too. That can bring the spirit back and say, oh yeah, you know what? I was here.
Okay.
I remember that. They're talking about me. So there's a couple of reasons that could happen. I think the primary reason on battlefield is either I'm afraid of judgment or they don't know that they've deceased.
That's one of the reasons I could see them coming back to answer a question, something vital that you may want to know or need to know. Or if it's something that perhaps they didn't get to say while they were here, but you're here so they can come back and tell you.
Right. It's that hidden history that sometimes you unearth something and say, well, that was never in the history books.
Right. Tell you what really happened,
Right.
Because
Exactly.
they got it wrong in the book, Right. They got it wrong in the history but I'm gonna come back and tell you what really happened because I was there. You know,
Right.
that would really be interesting because you know that a lot of your history, some of it does come from the diaries of people, like we talked about. You know, you can read somebody's personal diaries, you get certain information, maybe letters that they came up with, you know, that were written by the soldiers or whatever. But the total history gets lost. Okay, certain things that happen don't get recorded.
Right. Right.
And you know, whoever wrote these history books, they were not there during the battle, so all they have is this bits and pieces of the actual information.
Right.
So when they're writing this out, well, this is what happened. They don't really know 100% for sure. This is what happened. This is what they're putting together based on the little bit of information that they have.
Sure. Sure. And you know, history is also written by the victors. So there could be things that they're saying we're not going to disclose this information. And you know, again, Second Day Wright's Brigade, none of the Union accounts talk about him penetrating the lines. In fact, they just say Webb who was one of the main generals there. It was less than a paragraph of day 2 action at that thing, although there was a horrendous battle there. You know what I'm saying? So sometimes the victors get to determine what the history is.
Exactly. Now
that's why you need to go down to the letters of recollection and the diaries, and because you can find the truth. I mean, that's where
exactly.
Yeah, you know, officers always had an agenda. The guy on the ground didn't have really an agenda. He was just trying to survive.
Well, and you can say, for example, if an officer is writing about a skirmish that took place.
Yeah, his official report.
He made a bum move and got a bunch of his soldiers killed. He ain't gonna want to write that in his stuff though, because he don't know what kind of idiot he was and what he did.
No. In fact, the official report for the 15 Mass and the 82nd New York are two different things. One says my men fell back in good order, and the other official report says, yeah, they were running backwards. They were running like hell. You know, both fighting together, two different reports. So it's always interesting. You know, nobody wants to say, yeah, my men skedaddled and we did it really quick. They don't want to say that.
Well, as I'm saying, the officer, he's writing out his thing right here. You know, we had those skirmish.
Absolutely.
But I ain't gonna tell you that I made a bum move and got like 20 of my men killed.
Right.
You know, but then again, Private so and so over here that managed to live through it's over here right now. Yeah, Lieutenant so and so made a bum move and 20 of our guys got killed. You know.
Right.
So
absolutely.
I can just imagine being, you know, being the one writing this stuff down. You got two different versions of what happened, you know.
Sure.
Or and of course, you know, the lieutenant's version wouldn't tell you that he did something stupid and
right. Well,
most
of your companies had what they call company historians, and there was one guy that always wrote down the actions and everything. So if you get into somebody like the 3rd Georgia historian records, he was really very accurate about it. Then you get a pretty good idea of what actually happened. You read the official report, and then you read the historical report from the historian of the company, and then you go down to the personal letters. Somewhere in the middle is the truth.
Later on in different wars, of course, after in the more modernized era where they had cameras and all this stuff, and you had actual reporters that would go into battle with you, and they would be recording the stuff, taking pictures, and you know, and writing all this stuff down.
Yeah.
Back then, they didn't have that, so you know, it was like bits and pieces here and there. And if somebody did something they didn't want, you know, to go down against them to give them a bad name, they ain't got to put it in their memoirs. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah. Antietam actually is one of those few battles that was actually a battlefield photographer that took actual pictures of battle in action. It was one of the first times. I think it was like 2 or 3 different pictures. I don't think it was Gardner's shot, but it was one of his. I can't remember if it was Sullivan or whoever. But it actually shows a Union Forward observer where it's now the visitor center is on a hill, and he's watching the Union advance forward towards Piper's Field after they broke Bloody Lane. And they actually took a picture of that Union observer, Ford observer, observing the Confederate retreat and the Union advance.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't get that back then very often.
That's true. That's true.
Because they got to stand there for a little bit, get that picture going, you know?
Yeah.
Bullets are indiscriminate when you're on a battlefield.
I can just see it coming from different angles and how it would have gotten recorded, you know, by different people.
Sure.
You know, like, you know, the one over here that screwed up and the one over here that had to, he lived through it and he was telling the real story, and the guy over here that screwed up's like, oh, well, we had a little skirmish today, everything went well, you know. And then here's the guy over here saying, well, we had a little skirmish day 20, my buddies died because Lieutenant so-and-so did whatever, you know.
Right. He pulled back our right flank when he wasn't supposed to.
Yeah, which one do you think made it into the history book?
Yeah, it was the one that they were fine. They didn't have any issues.
Battle sites are conducive to residual hauntings. We know this. Fear, rage, despair, sorrow, and other highly charged emotions during the course of a battle. And that will cause residuals. So it's like burning into the fabric of time, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
You have a really traumatic, let's say, part in a battle where, I mean, it was just horrific. You know, I mean, these guys are just slamming into each other, bayonets, you know, they're being sliced and tore, and you know, so much death so quick. I could see that, you know, like being burned into the fabric of time, so to speak.
Sure. You take the wheat field, and a man was wounded, killed, or missing every 4 seconds.
And that's just, man, that's, wow.
So all you got to do is 4 of your buddies, and you're walking down the street, and you count the 4, somebody's gone. Count the 4 again, somebody else is gone. That's a horrendous number when you think about it. You can always break it down. Antietam, if you break down the whole battle, it's just about 1.15 seconds. Somebody was shot, killed, wounded, missing. That's that, you know, and that one day of fighting, that's a huge number. I mean, it puts it in perspective when you look at it from that. The triangular field is a perfect example. The 125th was hunkered down behind the wall. You got the Georgians moving up. You got cannon fire from Little Round Top lobbing in, indirect fire. Smith's battery can't triangulate the cannons down because they're too close to the wall, so they were useless. But you got the Georgians charging, 125th charge in with their colonel. Hand-to-hand combat ensues, the colonel falls. They fall back behind the wall. Georgians regroup. They charge again. They fire into the Georgians, and they charge to get the colonel's body. The 124th Orange Blossom was going to get the New York colonel back. So in getting the colonel's body, they lose their lieutenant colonel, right? Reassemble behind the wall. Georgians come in closer. They each trade volleys. Hand-to-hand happens again. They get the colonel back. They get back to the wall. The Georgians drive to the wall and force them back to the wood line. So that hand-to-hand fighting there, that's some of the most ferocious that you know, up to that phase of the fighting, it was horrendous. And you got to, you know, it's a bit maniacal. I mean, you got the rebel yell happening on one side, you have the Union huzzah on the other, and you have all the guys screaming like bloody hell because they know at any second they're dead.
Yeah.
And that kind of trauma and that kind of drama right in that area, every time I go, at the point now, I go back to Gettysburg and I hit Triangle Field, I just say, boys, I'm back. Anything you want to give me, you know I'm here for it. And I always get something. I always have an experience there. But those are the areas where that kind of hand-to-hand fighting, day 3, Armistead's men climbing the wall. That's an area that you always get activity near the bloody angle.
When we was at Parker's Crossroads, my partner looked up some information while we were there, and there's the picket fence that runs, it runs across like that. Of course, now there's the interstate right there.
Right.
But on the other side of the interstate, that's where they thought the Confederates was going to be coming in from the south. But they didn't. They came in from the north. And they pushed them back. Well, the only thing they had for cover was because they were like wide out in the open,
Sure.
And the only thing they had was that fence. So they got behind the fence, of course, and that didn't give them a lot of protection either, because the cannonballs and the rifle shot, the musket shots, were ripping the fence apart.
Yeah, tear right through it, man.
The splinters from the fence was tearing them up as bad as the rest of the.
Sure.
And then you had another Confederate group that came in from the east and split them up. When you had the guys behind the fence here, they surrendered. And then the guys in the woods back to the south, they sent a guy down there and said, well, your other guys already surrendered. You're going to, we want you to surrender. And they're like, no, Well, no, I'll take that back. I'm wrong. They didn't know that the guys up front had surrendered. So when they sent somebody to ask for their surrender, they didn't surrender because they thought they had these guys up here.
Mm-hmm.
And so you had a group up here, the ones behind the fence, they already surrendered. So actually the battle was mostly the guys in the woods.
The woods, right.
But what I was thinking about is how can you imagine, you're out in the open, you got these guys come up, they got artillery and everything, and they're pushing you backwards because you have nowhere to go, you're out in the open. And the only thing that you have to hide behind is also killing your men. All the splinters, all the stuff from the fence that, is being ripped and just thrown at them.
Right. Sometimes you can read accounts where either Union or Confederate artillery is firing into the woods. They're not even trying to hit the trees. They're hitting the trees because when those balls hit it and they splinter out, In warfare, it's not always about killing the enemy. Sometimes, especially Civil War, is about wounding the enemy, because then the advance has to stop for some of the people to take care of the wounded.
Right. And that gives them a chance to get in a better position to do more damage.
Right. Yeah, so that's a tough position to be in, where you don't have any cover, you're in the open field, and you're trading shots. That takes some chutzpah, man.
It does. It's horrible.
Yeah.
Another brand of high strangeness, and I like how this is worded, is known as objective hunting. Let's imagine you go to an antique store and you carry something home with you. And we all have at least heard one story of an attachment to an object. Like in this case, you're talking about a locket. The person takes the locket home. It's happening around their house.
Yep.
They take the locket back, everything quits.
Yeah, I was talking with a buddy that, well, not a buddy, but someone I was over near Sachs Bridge, doing some stuff over there, and the person was talking about they had visited the battlefield at Sachs Bridge, and they opened up the door and asked a soldier, "You guys want to come home with me?" And then closed the door, and they were laughing about it. And they got home, all kinds of activity happened. And there was a point where someone told them, "You need to go out, open your door, and tell them to come back in and go back to Gettysburg." And they did that, and then all the activity stopped. So, psychometry is interesting thing. Psychometry is the reading of objects. So I have this cup here, and let's say this cup was Jeb Stuart's favorite drinking cup, right? Well, his energy during the Civil War is ingrained in that cup, and that's what normally happens with antiques. They were loved by somebody, they were appreciated by somebody, and a
Right.
bit of their essence is in that item. So you buy it, you bring it home. Okay, it could be that the person who owned that has crossed over. That item comes to a new location. Hey, I want to check this out. It could also be that they're earthbound and they're attached to that item and they just haven't left. So now you're taking them home with you. So yeah. Certainly that can happen. I think John Zaffis has a show on that anyways about haunted antiques.
Well, it's like you were saying there, in that one part, the person that wore this locket could have been murdered.
Sure.
And it was like horrific, So you're going to feel their what's the word I'm looking for? Emotion. You're going to feel their anxiety, their fear, their
the last moment of their life is in that locket.
That'd be something else, and that's why I'm really leery about any more of these days. After when I read stuff, and it gives me the I guess a little bit of wisdom that I used to didn't have.
Mm-hmm.
If I go to a yard sale or something and I see an old object and everything, I'll say, "Oh man, that's really cool. I think I'll get that." And then, no, I don't think I'll get that.
Well, there's you can there's cleansings you do to cleanse an item and make it safe if you're worried about that. There's methods that we use.
It'd be my luck I wouldn't think about it, and I've done brought that sucker home.
Yeah, I got you. I have a friend. He has an electric company, and he was working on apartments updating security cameras, and he ran into this spirit, and it wasn't old. It was probably from the 70s, 80s, 90s, somewhere in there. But he kept seeing something flashing, and then his camera would register something moving, and he'd go and look, and there's nothing there. He sent his associate to go look, and nothing was there. And he's been with me on a couple of investigations, and he said, I said, next time you're over there and that's happening, you tell him just to interact with you and show you something, make a noise, or leave you something. And he was walking up steps, and he did that. And he said a penny appeared in the air in front of him, twirling, and then hit the step and just landed on the step. 1992. And
wow.
And he started finding pennies everywhere. So he said, I said, hey, listen, man, can you do something a little larger than a penny? How about a dime, a quarter? How about $1? And he was kind of joking because he's like, hey, maybe I can get me a $50 out of this guy, right? But as it was, there was a lot of appointments from the spirit, and he went all the way up to like I think it was a 50-cent piece.
Wow.
Yeah, and it would just appear right in front of him. And the guy that his apprentice that was working with him, he didn't believe him until he saw that penny appear right in front of him, twirling and then drop. He actually doesn't work with him anymore. But anyways, you get certain activity like that can happen. Not everything is associated with just objects. In this case, let me get back to this before I get on that. I'm sorry. He took one of the pennies home, put it on his table, and things started happening at the house. So I said, take the penny, put it back, and tell him, look, you're more than willing to have a conversation with him, but you can't follow you home. You can't do that. And everything stopped when he did that. So it could be, it doesn't have to be an antique. It could be, a rock from the battlefield that you might take back home. It could be anything. It doesn't have to be an antique. But there are ways to take care of that issue and clear that energy and help it to cross over if it hasn't crossed over.
Well, I've always been I don't know what's the proper word here. I've always been interested in the Civil War, and for the during the time now, and you can if you go back to like the 1500s when they fought with like the crude weapons that they had at that time, you know, it was horrible how some people got slaughtered and
Sure.
messed up. But and then you go into the Civil War time, of course, with the cannons that they had
Right.
and you know the
Rifle,
muskets
rifle
they had,
muskets, right.
musket ball. Um, and of course, during that time, as we know, they didn't have proper means of surgery and all that. So if a person got wounded and they would just amputate it.
Right.
You know, arms, legs. You know, I think it was Gettysburg where the hospital had the pile of arms and legs and stuff outside the window.
That's Dunkard Church, Antietam.
Okay, well,
Antietam.
it was
But
one.
at Gettysburg, they used a lot of barns and some of the houses. But like at Powers Farm, they had a big field and they dug a big hole and they were stacked. Arms and legs were just stacked.
About having so many that they were just throwing them out the window, and it was just like a pile.
Yeah, that was Dunkard Church after Antietam. Yeah, they would just they used the church as
Can
amputation
you imagine
station.
how horrible that is? And then even after having that done, you know, not very many of them survived after even having it
Right.
done.
Yeah, disease took care of a lot of those wounded, unfortunately.
So you know, anything about the Civil War where it's traumatic and it's you know there's going to be experience. Um, and as you stated, being at the right place at the right time can get you the best, you know,
Result.
the best evidence of that. But still, activity every day in places like that. You know,
There
it's
is. I
hard.
mean, the reality is that you know, history is layered. So, you know, it could be a battle that was a 3-day battle, and you might be trying to get evidence on day 1, and all of a sudden everything shifts and goes to day 2. You know, for us in front of Brown's Battery, we were trying to get the alignment of Wright's Brigade coming in on day 2. Pickett's charge jumped in on day 3, and we captured the last moments of Armistead and his men and the words that they said. So, you know, it's layered, and some history, like in taverns, it's layers upon layers. So it could be 1700s, 1800s, 1900s, modern day. It just depends on what activity happened at those locations.
Exactly.
Right? And even on battlefields, not everything is, so, you know, Civil War battlefields. Not all hauntings are ghosts or ghost soldiers. It could be, you know, somebody that really loved to be there and unfortunately died visiting the battlefield, or just
Yeah,
loved it so much, wanted to go back and just stay there. And it could be
exactly.
from, yeah, it could be from the 20th century, you know.
Well, that's like somebody. I had somebody say one time, well, cemeteries are really haunted. You have a lot of spirits that are at the cemetery, and I'm like, why would somebody want to stay at a cemetery?
Yeah,
You know, if I pass away, you're going to go bury me in a cemetery. I'm not going to stay at that cemetery. I'm going to go back to my house where I was comfortable.
right.
You know, I mean,
Normally, you think that cemetery being holy ground would be, you know, a resting place, but um, I've been called into cemeteries before because activity has happened, and sometimes in those places you get negative vortexes and you get negative energies, even demonic energy that's trying to keep souls in place there. Um, so,
yeah,
you know, I don't normally go into cemeteries unless there's a request to try and facilitate arresting.
the best picture that we ever got actually was at a cemetery,
Hmm.
but it wasn't in a cemetery. It was like just outside of the cemetery.
Ah,
Cemetery is it's a little cemetery and it's way out in the backwoods, and it doesn't have a name, or at least not a signed name that you
right,
can read.
right.
So this is such and such cemetery, but the front part is mowed and all cleaned up, and it's got like about 3 tombstones out there that are more modern. And then behind that, in the trees and the brush and everything that's all grown up, there's an old wrought iron fence with a gate, and there's tombstones in there where it's like, I guess it was like a family.
Family plot.
Yeah. And of course, the fence is all trampled down. It's grown up in vines and weeds and trees, and but we were standing in the one part of this where there was like a row of the big tall stones that come up to a point. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, yeah. It's a monument.
They all been knocked over probably years ago. Probably ain't no telling who did it, but
Sure.
it was done deliberate.
Right.
But we were standing in there. We were just snapping some pictures, and my buddy snapped some pictures out across. There's a barbed wire fence there at the back, and there's a little bit of a field and some woods. And he was just like doing a pan, snapping pictures, like And outside area, we caught a woman in red floating in the field. Nothing below the bottom of her dress, no legs. You don't see anything. You see her gown, her red gown.
Wow.
And it's like ruffled at the bottom. Really looking.
Right.
It's kind of like a V cut, sort of a little bit up here. And then you see her. She looks right at you.
Wow. Did you take that picture? Did you take that picture?
He took the picture. I didn't, but he sent it to me that night when we got home. He said, "You got to see this."
Wow.
And yeah, I can show you the pictures.
Yeah, I love
and
that'd be awesome.
she looks right at you. But she wasn't in the cemetery. She was outside of the fence area there in the field part. And it kind of looked like a ball gown. It was sort of like maybe something somebody would wear to a dance.
Wow.
And I was wondering, because it kind of almost looked like she's like holding up the edge of her dress at the bottom there, where the frilly part is.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of wondering if maybe dancing. You know what I mean?
I could, if I could enhance it.
Like she was maybe still dancing.
Oh, still dancing. Oh, okay. That's a possibility. Yeah. I mean,
possibly where she was, there might have been a house there.
Right. Or it could be. Cemetery doesn't mean that the spirits always stay in it. They wander. If they're still there and they wander in and out, and that happens. More regular than most people would imagine.
Right.
Yeah, I'd love to see the picture though, because I'd like to be able to see that. That's awesome.
I'll PM that to you after the show.
Okay, great. In the book, I talk about a couple of the evidence that we get in there too, like the soldier crossing the stone wall at Gettysburg, triangular field. Sometimes you get some incredible evidence, and you're literally blown away. To me, it's a gift, because I go there and I don't expect to get anything. I simply say, if you want to share your story, any little bit about it, please do. The only thing that I ever really went out to try to get was a rebel yell. And I finally got that about the 7th year of going to Gettysburg to try and get it at East Cemetery Hill. And you can hear the musket shot. There's one or two, and then you definitely hear the yip, 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 that little yell going on. I was like, oh, man. Took me 7 years, but I finally got it. And that's there's things that I on my author page on Facebook at Patrick K. Burke, I post different stuff and videos from not just supernatural media, but some of my old battlefield stuff and some of the newer stuff. So people can always go there to check out some of the evidence, and I always post different things or different thoughts. Or I talk about the 2 books I'm writing now, because sometimes I just get writer's cramp and I got to talk about it.
I just think, a lot of this stuff, and I kind of, I saw a couple of spirits when I was 9, and of course I had it beat through my head that I didn't see that. I imagined it. It didn't really happen.
Yeah.
So I quit seeing anything. I didn't see nothing after that. But I had experiences over the years that didn't make sense, And I knew what I saw even back then, even though they
kind of drilled it into you that was a possibility.
In other words, I learned real quick to keep that stuff to myself.
Sure. It's unfortunate, but that's the time frame that we grew up in.
We're talking about, this was like in the 60s.
Right. Exactly.
That was hush hush. Nobody talked about stuff like that.
No. It's different today. I mean, my 2 girls, Emily's 21 and Shannon's 18, and Emily's a 0-point field medium. I've trained her since she was 9. And Shannon's an empath. I've trained her since she was about 10. And it's totally different. Even though my mom was definitely very sensitive and knew the different haunting experiences that went on in the house, my dad never talked about it. My siblings experienced it, but we never talked about it until maybe around 2001, 2002. We started talking about it. I always thought it was just me.
Right.
That guy who killed himself in our house, you all been seeing him, and you didn't. I'm the youngest of 7. You all didn't tell me about this. You didn't acknowledge it to me all this time. I was thinking I'm crazy. Come on now. So, but yeah.
Plus, it
It's
did
a
help
different story, though.
in a town where you had a church on every corner too.
Right.
You didn't go around talking about stuff like that.
No, not back then. But like I say, today's totally different. It's a different society.
Well,
different.
it's a household word, you know.
Yeah. Right.
Of course, you can thank ghost hunters and ghost.
All the shows that came out and brought that to the forefront of the human thought. Yeah, they did a service. There's no doubt.
Yeah. Now we were talking about emotional energies imprinted and on objects and stuff, and of course, combat zone object hauntings usually associated with the personal objects that belong to the soldiers, like Bibles, guns, knives, Lucky Charms, stuff like that.
Yep.
Presence of these objects now buried somewhere on the battlefield, and if you dug one up and took it home with you,
you got company.
Yeah, you're gonna have a soldier living with you.
Yeah, you got company. There's no doubt.
And I always, at one time I always thought, yeah, I'd like to take a metal detector in the battlefield and find some kind of souvenir, just to have something to say. But now, even, and you got to think that people find these things on the battlefield and they take them to most of your battlefields now are like state parks or some kind of something.
Right. So they normally take it to the ranger and
they have like
this on the field. Right.
They have their own museums where they keep all the stuff in.
That's right. Yeah.
So if you find something out there on that battlefield and you take it to the museum, that museum's going to be haunted, buddy.
Yeah. There's no doubt about that. There's a lot of history and a lot of attachment to some of those items they find on the field.
Now, we were talking earlier about where's the best place to go to find some activity. Go to the museum.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee you there's something there.
Yeah. You should always get a little bit of something.
If any of that stuff came off the battlefield, I guarantee you there's something there.
Yeah, especially if it's, it seems like some of the more well-known items, like Jeb Stuart's uniform and his boots when he was killed at the museum. You tend to think that those would have a little bit more activity around them, but the reality is it doesn't matter if it's the musket that they found on the field that killed a private or if it's the musket ball that killed Jeb Stuart. They're both going to have the same possibility of having a paranormal activity around it.
Well, yeah, if you got their weapons, that was their livelihood.
Yep.
So if you got that weapon in a museum, they're more likely going to be there where that weapon is. That was their livelihood.
Yeah, and if they're not there, and you're talking about them, and you're talking about the experience, it certainly is again a percentage chance that they might just drop in and, that was me. That was my weapon when I had that life.
Yeah. Okay, let me see where we're at. Little Round Top, you're talking about carried a soldier who fought at Little Round Top carried a tintype of his wife in his pocket. He was very suddenly and violently shot and killed in action. From time to time, his spirit is seen wandering around the base of the little round top, as if he was searching for something. But if he lost his picture during that battle, for say, he lost his picture of his wife, yeah, I could see him, being there searching for it.
Yeah, and that's probably not a residual. That's probably a live interaction. That, in other words, that's a live spirit that Earthbound hasn't crossed over, and unfinished business. I have got to have my wife's tinny type so I can.
Before he can go, he's got to find that picture.
Yep. So that's probably. But then you get the residual one of the Phantom Brigade. That even in 1920 there was a delegation of Japanese officials visiting the battlefield, and they were at Little Round Top, and they watched this brigade do very specific maneuvers, and then go off around the saddle, Little Round Top, Big Round Top. And when they got back with their guide, who wasn't with them at the time, he said, "Oh, thank you for the reenactment." What do you mean the reenactment? So
right.
Got a brigade out there, and they said, "There's no reenacting brigades here. I can't tell you what you saw, but there was no reenactors." And they call that the Phantom Brigade because every now and then this, brigade just shows up and then marches off and disappears.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of those seen up there.
Right, but then you get the ones, Devil's Den, where the Confederate comes up to, modern day people with cameras. Oh, you want me to pose with you? And they think he's reenactor, and down to the smell, no shoes on, right? No boots, tattered pants, floppy hat, makes him a Texan. And he goes, takes a picture. And when they develop it, he's not in the picture. So, that's a live interaction. That's not a residual. That's a guy coming, "Hey, you want to take a picture with you?" And he's just having some fun.
Yeah.
Now, did he come back, or is he bound there because he hasn't crossed over? That's hard to say unless you feel the energy.
Now, also, and I would expect this to be true, because they've already died, right? They know they're dead. For whatever reason they stayed there for, they're still there.
Mm-hmm.
But now, some spirits do have a sense of humor.
Oh, yeah.
And I could see them doing something just to mess with people.
Sure.
And to them it's funny. They get a laugh out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to get a chuckle out of it. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
At Dr. Mudd's, the kids like the women to sit on the floor. And if they have ribbons in their hair, they'll actually play with the ladies' ribbons in their hair.
I can see them coming up, "Hey, you may take a picture with you, whatever, Then you look at, "Well, where the hell did he go?" And he's sitting back going,
yeah. The worst part is that an arm's stuck up in the air. There should be somebody there, but there's no one there. So
right.
You got to look at that and say, "Wow, okay."
You got your arm around the dude, right? So your picture comes out with you with your arm out like this.
Right. Yeah.
And he's sitting back. "Oh."
Yeah. That's a little chuckle, man.
It's you gotta love the paranormal, though. You really do, because there's a lot of tragedy and tragic stuff, yeah, but there's some stuff where you can see the spirits getting a chuckle out of it, and they know they're gone, and they're still stuck around there. They might as well have a little fun.
Right.
Yeah.
They're still human. They're just in a different light. They're walking in a different light. That's all. And I think one of the biggest attractions for a lot of people in the paranormal, certainly some people get a rush that, they're dealing with someone they can't see necessarily. But it's always that endearing question of what happens when we die? What goes on? Where do we go? And that's part of almost, I would think, every paranormal researcher, if it's not a goal, it's a thought. Can I prove life after death?
Well, you can see also, if on the other side it's not all peaches and cream, maybe there's some bad stuff that goes on over there.
Sure.
but these spirits get tired of you asking them, well, what goes on over there when you get on the other side? So they're going to tell you, oh man, we have fun and parties and games and all kinds of stuff. You know, come on, you need to come on over here. You know,
Yeah, join us. It's a party. Yeah, they mostly when I do the interactions, whether it's on a battlefield or it's somebody's house or it's a store comp, most of the stuff that I do now is trying to figure out why is a haunting happening. Let's get to the base of that. Can we resolve it so spirits can rest and the people living there can go forward with their life? Primarily what we find out is in some places like hospitals, infirmaries, sane asylums, you have some really negative energy that's holding souls in place. So you got to deal with that negative energy, get rid of that negative energy, and then you can deal with the souls and try and cross them over so they can find final rest. You know, I actually never had a spirit say, "It's a party over here. Come on and join me."
right?
I haven't had that happen. And if that does happen, I'm just gonna have to tell them, "Yeah, you're gonna have to wait, dude. I got some more work to do yet."
All right, all right.
Got to get puppy love.
That's my co-host there. So
Yeah, got to get some dog love. I got you.
I had to get involved a little bit.
It's all good, brother. I love dogs.
That's my baby right there. Usually, where you find me, you'll find her.
Awesome.
But oh, and that's another thing. What about pets? You think about do your pets stick around after?
Yeah, you know, yes, they'll stick around, but they'll also cross over. And I've got recordings of dogs whining at like the Needwood Mansion. One of my best buddies who died unexpectedly, Ed Double Jr. He had a dog that was known as Brutus, but it was a ghost hunting dog. Incredible dog, could pinpoint and look, you know, how dogs will perk up, try and figure out, is it flight or fight? Can I beat this or do I have to run? But the direction he was looking in, you'd snap a picture, you might get a basic soul form in an orb or a ribbon or a shadow, or your EVP might catch something. Pretty incredible. But his father, I called Junior Little Ed and I call his dad Big Ed. He constantly feels Brutus around him every now and then. So I think when it comes to pets, Joshua Warren, you know, wrote Ghost Pets, but I think that they definitely stick around. They visit. In some cases, they stay with you. They you know, especially I think with dogs, it's a loyalty bond there that
I mean,
doesn't overcome.
They were content, so
Right.
you know,
Right.
they want to be around people that they love. They want to be around people that you know, that pay a lot of attention to them.
Right. But I've had dogs brush up along my legs on investigations before. There's no dog there, you know. But yeah, I've had that, picked up the sound of dogs whining, that kind of thing. So they're definitely active. Some stay and, you know, some go and come back.
I mean, I would want them to go wherever, you know, their spirit needed to be.
Sure.
At the same time, it'd be nice to think that they wanted to stick around with me, you know.
Right.
And I've had numerous pets. There's certain ones that will stand out, you know, more than others, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe because they had a certain personality or something, or this one here, when she goes, if I don't go before she does, that's going to be hard right there.
Yeah. You had her a long time? She's been with you a long time?
I've had her since she was a puppy, but she's about, I think she's around 9 or so now.
Yeah.
But she's been a permanent fixture to me pretty much ever since she's been, you know, and It's funny because there's three of us that live here. Me and my wife and my youngest daughter stays here with us, and we all three have a dog. That's to us personally.
Right, right.
Her baby, one of her babies, actually, she had one litter of babies before she got fixed, and that's my daughter's. And then we have one we call Shorty, which is a little Jack Russell dog. And that's my wife's, and she stays with my wife wherever she's at, and the other one stays with my daughter where she's at, and this one stays with me where I'm at.
Okay. It works though, right? It works. So it's all
works fine.
Awesome.
We're getting down. We got about 9 minutes left. If you want to give out some links to where people can go and find this book, I think they really need to go get it because this sucker is cool.
Thank you.
If you're interested in all this kind of stuff, plus battlefield history and everything, man, you can't pass this one up.
Thank you. Yeah, you can get it at Amazon.com, and it's on Kindle too, and you can get it Barnes & Noble, most major bookstores. You could always message me on Facebook, Patrick K. Burke, if you want to. I have a few copies, so if keep some in stock. If somebody wants to buy one autographed, then we can make arrangements to do that. But primarily Amazon and Barnes & Noble bookstores. For whatever reason, if it's not there, they can get it for you.
Awesome.
Yes, sir.
Um,
And they can also, again, visit my Facebook page, and I'm part of the Supernatural media team, so there's stuff you'll see me doing different stuff there too.
So Barnes & Noble, Amazon, go check it out. Get this book because you're going to like it. I know Mary will. Mary's in all this stuff like I am, see.
Right.
Yeah, Mary would like to have it. Mary and Megadoodle over there in the chat, they're awesome people.
Oh, they're awesome. Good to meet them.
Rhodey says this has been a great show. Thank you.
Thank you.
Divergent Path is the ones we were with last weekend, and there's some great people. Matt and Melinda Blick from Divergent Path Paranormal, they're awesome people.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, we've been talking about Ghost Soldiers of Gettysburg, and we've talked about different types of hauntings and things that occur with tragic battlefield experiences. Now, would you say though, just like the battlefield cemeteries would be extremely haunted, or?
I don't know if I would say extremely. I mean, I've been through there, and it's a bit more quiet than what you would expect, but there's definitely activity. What I have noticed is that they tend to interact a little bit more directly with you. For instance, at Mary's Height at Fredericksburg.
For instance?
I'm sorry?
They interact more directly with you there than they would on the battlefield?
Well, what I found is at the cemetery, you'll get more direct interaction, not earthbound spirits that haven't crossed over at the battlefield cemeteries. That's been my experience. So I call that more interaction with me, because that higher energy has more ability to communicate on a better level. So for instance, at Mary's Height at Fredericksburg, my brother and I felt a couple of Union soldiers that were buried there, and it was a still night, no wind blowing. And I said, John, get in front of the camera. I want to see if we get some interaction. Call those boys over. So he's called these boys by the name, and in front of them, a couple of ribbons go flying up. And I said, hey, could they do something else? And he said, hey, boys, go make that flag move. And now there's no wind blowing, but the flag is out there as if it's wind and it's blowing. I was like, way cool. So that kind of interaction, I think, happens a little bit more within the cemeteries, but it doesn't happen a lot. I mean, and again, I don't make it a habit of going into the cemeteries. Kind of think that's a place for rest, but in this one occasion, we were kind of drawn there at the battlefield cemetery.
Okay, mate.
He wants all she wants all the attention, man.
Well, she
It's all
may
good.
be getting about ready to go. Take care.
Yeah, I got you.
But I hope everybody enjoyed the show, and we will have to do this again. If we'll pick a time a few months down the road when you've had some new experiences and been on some new adventures, and we'll do this again.
Sounds good, Roger. I'd love to do it with you, buddy. Hopefully we can get you out to Gettysburg and I can meet you out there.
Oh, that'd be awesome. I'd love to go out there.
Yep.
I mean, the thing with me is I can't get around long hikes anymore. I have to sit down quite frequently.
Yep, I got you, but you don't need to. There's locations we can go where we can just camp out and you'll get an experience.
Hey, oh, that'd be awesome.
Yep. We can make that.
Everybody in the chat room, we appreciate it. And everybody that was watching, listening in, that wasn't in the chat room, we appreciate you guys too, and girls. It's been an honor having you on the show, Patrick. I appreciate it, buddy.
I appreciate it too. It's an honor talking with you and your audience, man. Really enjoyed it. And
we're going to go ahead and we're going to shut this thing down a couple of minutes early because I think my dog has some business she needs to do. And I don't want her doing it in here.
No worries, brother. No worries.
But appreciate it, everybody. And Wednesday night, Paranormal Graveyard will be talking about haunted forests. So that ought to be interesting.
Yep.
So we'll see everybody in. Good night, everybody.
All right. Thanks, Roger.